Okay, so we're going to go over conversions today, and conversions are pretty easy to do, pretty easy to understand, but it is essential that we understand these, how to do conversions in order to move forward. So it is going to be pretty easy, pretty quick, but very essential. So first of all, let's look at a few easy equalities here, or different things that we say are equal to each other. So we have 1 minute equals 60 seconds. Okay, we all know that. That's pretty easy. 60 minutes equals an hour. Again, easy. 24 hours in a day, and 365 days in a year. Which is a quick little fun fact. It's actually 365 and a quarter days in a year, and that's the reason we have leap year every year, or every 4 years. But we're just going to use 365 for our calculations. So we have a little calculation we want to do here, or a little conversion we want to do here. And it is 14 years and 21 days. We want to convert that into seconds. And this is actually kind of odd because it's actually two different types of time, which is, these are all units of time, right? So we can do conversions, but we have years, we have days, and we want to eventually go to seconds. So let's get a little game plan here. So first of all, we probably want to take the 14 years here, and we want to convert it into days. And then when we get it to days, we can, once we convert years to days, we can actually add the 201. And then we could take that total amount of days and eventually convert it into seconds. Right? So let's do that. So first of all, let's take our 14 years. And we want to convert that to days. Now, how do we do that? There's lots of ways that I'm sure you've probably done conversions, but there's a particular way that I'd like you to try to do it, because doing conversions in this particular way it's much easier to see how things cancel out. So what we want to do is we want to take a conversion or something that's equal to each other, and we want to write it as a fraction. So let's say let's take 365 days in 1 year. Let's write it to 1 year and write it as a fraction, 365 days. Now let's look at this for a second. So we have 1 year on top in the numerator and 365 in the denominator. So 1 year is equal to 365, and so each of the numerator and denominator are exactly equal to each other. So it's just like we wrote 1 over 1. And if 1 over 1, of course, is just 1. And so if we took this fraction here and we multiplied it by something, then we're really just multiplying by 1. And as we know, if we multiply anything by 1, it doesn't change the original value. So we want to do that, and we can do that in multiple ways. So we could actually do it the other way around. So 365 days is over 1 year. Now again, looking at this is the exact same thing, right? It's just flip-flopped around. 365 is on the numerator and year is in the denominator. So it's just like saying 1 over 1. No different. Okay, so we can do it either way. But which of these two, if we're going to convert to days, which of these two do we want to use? Okay, well, if we use the first one, let's just look and see what would happen if we did 1 year and 365 days, right? And this is understood to be over 1. If we multiply this out and we look at our units, we're going to get year times year, right? Year times year. Now, that would give us something like year squared, right? Year squared divided by days, because now we got day in the denominator. Of course, we don't want year squared. We just want just plain days, right? And we want it in the numerator, because we don't want 1 over days either. So we want it in the numerator. So how do we do this? How can we fix this? Well, let's change it the other way around. See what that does. So if we do the 365 days in the numerator and then put the 1 year in the denominator, well, year and year now cancel, right? So we have day in the numerator. Perfect. Works out. That's what we're wanting. So all we have to do now is the math, which is 14 times 365. 14 times 365 is 5,110 days. Now, you can add, or you can multiply, you can divide fraction or any units, and you can come up with some new unit. But if you want to add to or subtract two different things, the units have to match. So now that we are in days, we can actually add this 201 days plus 201 days. If these units didn't match, we couldn't do this, but they do. So we can in fact add these together. So we end up with 5,311 days. Okay? So pretty simple. So let's take this and convert it into seconds, because that's what we are asked to do. We want to convert into seconds, right? So 5,311 days, and we're going to multiply this by what? Well, we could go straight to seconds if we knew how many seconds there were in a day. And I think, I'm pretty close. I don't know how many seconds there are in a day in the top of my head, but I'm not entirely sure. So why don't we just do some other conversions here to make it a little easier. We do know that there are 24 hours in a day, so we can do that. Days in the numerator, so we know if we want to get rid of day and go to something else, we want day in the denominator for our conversion. So we're going to put 1 day is 24 hours. Okay? Again, this is understood to be over 1. So day cancels day. Now we're to hours. Of course, if I knew how many hours there were in a second, I could do that conversion. I do know that one for sure, but we don't have that in our list over here, so let's just go ahead and continue on with our conversion using the list that we have. So we have hour in the numerator. Let's put hour in the denominator. 1 hour equals 60 minutes. And then, of course, we have our final 1 minute equals 60 seconds. Now let's look at this. So we've already canceled days, and we actually did hours, and then we did minutes. So our final unit is our final unit is seconds. So all we have to do is the math now. We have 5,311 times 24 times 60 times 60 for the numerator. And that's going to be equal to 458,870,400 seconds. And then, of course, we have everything in all the units in the denominator were canceled out. So there is no units for the denominator. The math for the denominator is just 1 times 1 times 1 times 1, which is just 1. And everything's assumed to be over 1, so we don't even have to write that. We could write it out, over 1, but we don't need to do that. So that is our final answer. Okay, so that's a simple conversion with one type of unit, but a lot of times we have more than one unit, one type of unit for some. Or one type of variable that we're going to use in units. So we have time that we've already dealt with. So let's look at distance. So we have a couple of equalities here. We have 12 inches equals 1 foot, 3 feet equals a yard, and 1,760 yards equals 1 mile. So we can get from inches all the way to miles if we need to. And of course, we already know the time conversions as well. So let's look at this. We have new turtles can swim an average of 25 miles in 30 hours. And they want to know how many inches per second is it. So 25 miles per 30 hours. Well, this per right here is something that we say when we're saying divide by, or it can mean divide by. In other words, if we take 25 hours and we would divide it by, 25 miles, and we divide it by 30 hours, we get some unit here, miles per hour. So that per is used in a lot of places when in meaning divide. So miles per hour is one place. Another one would be PSI, which is pounds per square inch. There are many others, but the per is used to say divide by in many cases. So this is unique. We have two types of units of miles, which are unit of distance, and we have hours, a unit of time, and they're together. So how do we deal with this? Well, first of all, we have two numbers here. We can simplify this. It's just, if you look at this just as a fraction, 25 divided by 30, we can simplify 25 divided by 30. And I'm going to go ahead and use the decimal. We could use a non-decimal, but I'm going to use a decimal to make things a little easier. I think is not as precise, but a little easier. And it's 0.83 repeating, and that's going to be in miles again per hour. So we didn't change anything. We just simplified the fraction. Okay, and that's per 1 hour. Okay, now we need to eventually get to inches per second over here. Inches per second. So how do we do this? Now, if we look at it, inches is a unit of distance, and it's in the numerator. So because we have per, so the inches is going to be numerator, seconds is going to be denominator. Okay, this is what we're looking for. Inches per second. Okay. Over here we have, of course, miles per hour. Okay, so that's miles per hour. So that's going to be distance divided by time. Inches per second is distance divided by time. So we're perfectly fine. We're not changing the units. There's still distance divided by time. We're just converting from one type of unit to another. So how do we do this? It's the same thing as what we just did earlier. All we're going to do is convert, but we're going to do one at a time. Let's start with our time. Okay, it's because we just did that one. So let's go ahead and work at that. So hours in that previous problem was actually in the numerator, but this time hours is in the denominator. So we can still deal with this though. So hours we're going to use in the numerator this time to cancel out. So we're going to put hours up here. Now what are we trying to go to? We're trying to go to seconds. So we want to go down. So how many hours is there in a minute? Or in other words, how many minutes is there in an hour? So it'd be 60 minutes in 1 hour. And then our hours are canceled. Now we got minutes in the denominator, but we want to eventually get to what to cancel. Sorry about that. We want to eventually get to seconds. So our minutes are going to be in the numerator. 1 minute divided by 60 seconds. And our minutes cancel. And we have seconds in the denominator. And that's exactly what we're looking for right here. Okay. We still have to deal with this miles though. So how do we do that? Miles in the numerator. We want to put miles in the denominator. Okay. We want to eventually get to inches. So 1 mile is 1760 yards. Miles cancels with miles over here. And then of course we have yard in the denominator. 1 yard is 3 feet. And the yards cancel. And then our next and final version is 1 foot is 12 inches. And our feet cancel. So how do we do this? We have our final units, inches per second. That's what we're wanting. How do we do the math? Well, if you remember, when you're multiplying multiple fractions, you can multiply all the numerators times all the denominators. So if we do 0.83 times 1 times 1 times 1760 times 3 times 12, we actually end up with 52,588.8 inches per 3,600 seconds, which is just 60 times 60. Now, again, this can be simplified, so let's look at that. If we simplify the math, all we do is we go to 14.6 inches per second. Pretty simple. All right, last thing. One more example. GPS, global positioning satellite system, is malfunctioning. In this case, I believe they're referring to the receiver. So the GPS receiver is malfunctioning. And you can only get your velocity in feet per second, which would be unfortunate. Currently, you've been averaging 3.2 feet per second. You know your destination is 9 miles away. So that's unfortunate. They've given you your distance, your velocity in feet per second, but your distance from target in miles. So it's wondering how long it'll take you to arrive in hours. And which we don't even know. It's if you're 9 miles away, which if you were driving, hours would be wouldn't be the right unit to measure in. But if you were walking, and we don't really know, 3.2 feet per second, is that driving speed or walking speed? So let's do the problem. We'll figure it out. So again, we see this per. That's going to be in divide. So we can say 3.2 feet divided by second, feet per second, and then we assume to be 1 second. And it's asking us how long it will take us to arrive in hours. Eventually, what we're wanting is an answer that's just hours. Currently, we have a distance divided by time. So eventually, this time, which is in the denominator, is going to have to move to the numerator, and we're going to have to somehow get rid of the distance. So how do we do that? Well, let's get things in the proper units. We have a few hints as to what we might want to convert to. We see miles here, and we see hours here. So let's convert our distance part here in the feet into the miles, and the time part, seconds, into hours. We can definitely do that. We know how to do that. So let's go ahead and do that. 60 seconds is 1 minute. And then, of course, there's 60 minutes in an hour. Okay. And if we look at that, minutes cancel with minutes, seconds with seconds. So we're still left with hour in the denominator. Perfect. That's what we're looking for. We have feet. Let's go to miles. So there are 3 feet in 1 yard. And then, of course, there's 1760 yards. And 1 mile. Yards cancel, feet cancel. So we do the math, 3.2 times 60 times 60 times 1 times 1. And we're going to end up with 11,520 miles. And if we do 1 times 1 times 1 times 3 times 1760, we get 5280 hours. So if we simplify that, we're going to end up with 2.18 repeating miles. It's 1.8 repeating miles per hour. Okay? So that's cool, but not what it asked for, right? It's asking us for a unit. It is just in hours. We somehow need to get rid of this miles here. Now, there is a formula for this, but if you didn't know the formula, let's just look at what you might do, okay? So we have 2.18 miles and we have 1 hour here. We want to get rid of the miles. We know there are 9 miles to our destination. So let's look at this. What happens if we flip this miles and hours here? So we do 1 hour, 2.18 miles, and then we multiply this by the 9 miles, and of course this is just going to be over 1. Miles cancel, right? And so we have 9 times 1, 2.18 times 1. So it ended up being 9 divided by 2.18, which is going to be 4.12 hours, which is the right answer. So how did we get that answer? I mean, like, we didn't know the formula to do this. We just looked at the units, right? Well, what is the formula, first of all? Well, velocity equals, let me go ahead and spell it out, or speed in this case. We didn't give a direction. The velocity equals distance divided by time, right? So if we need to do some, it's not really what it's not really the formula we needed, because we had a velocity and we were wanting time. Really, we wanted to solve for time. So how do we do that? Actually, let's look at this real quick before we look at that. So distance divided by time. Notice that we have distance on miles and time in hours. So the formula gives away the units. Units give away the formula. But let's look and see how we change this formula up, because this is pretty important that we know how to take this formula and get a different formula. So we could take time and multiply both sides by time, and we end up with distance equals velocity times time, right? And then if we wanted to get time by itself, we can do distance divided by velocity. So time, and you just divide both sides, of course, equals distance divided by velocity. If you don't know how to do this, to get these different formulas, then you probably want to go back and look at your algebra and how you can get these different formulas. But that's it for conversions. This is sorely needed. If you don't know this, and you're going to be very lost when we get to the next units. So please make sure that you know it. If you don't, make an appointment to see your instructor to figure out how to get to the level you need.